Hello there. Are you a speaker or do you ever dream of being a speaker? Whatever you are, whether be it in an institution or an organization, I believe there is that time that you get to communicate with people. And it's important to be clear, to be heard and understood. Now, today we're going to be learning about the secrets of speaking and listening. This is Now Tell Us. I'm your host, Anthony Murore. At Now Tell Us, we have guests come and tell us stories, they come and inspire us, they come and educate us on a subject, and always we have great guests. We have a great guest today. He is an international speaker. He has spoken so many times. He's been on TED. Yeah, if you know what that is. But much more, he's going to tell us once he comes on here. His name is Julian Treasure, and he's going to be here shortly. Before I bring him on, please can you share this episode with all your friends? If you have a question as we go on about speaking, now please ask. We love questions. If you have any feedback to give about this podcast, we appreciate feedback and so we thank you in advance. And now, without taking one more minute, I would ask you to join me as we go to meet our special guest today, Julian. Here we go. Hello, Julian. Hello.
Hello, Anthony. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on to our show. We appreciate your presence.
It's a great pleasure, and I'm really pleased to be here.
Yeah, I think there was a little lag there of the connection, but then I believe it's going to be okay as we get going.
Okay, that's no problem.
Yeah, can we know where you are in the world, please?
Yes, it's probably quite surprising. I live in a place called Orkney, Orkney. It's an archipelago of islands off the north coast of Scotland. So in the North Atlantic, and very beautiful. You have to like wind, but it is a very beautiful place, and I've been living here for quite a few years now. It's my home. I live here with my partner and our two young children, and it's a wonderful place.
Wow, that's wonderful. And when you say you've been living there for some years, that kind of it signifies that that's not where you were born. You moved there. Where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in London and
Okay.
grew up in
Mm-hmm.
London. But to be honest, I've had my fill of big cities. I don't mind visiting them now,
Mm-hmm.
but I wouldn't want to live in one now. It's too noisy for me. I'm very sensitive to sound,
Oh,
increasingly as I get older as well. Sound has been my life for more than 20 years now. And so I really enjoy being in a place where most of the time what I hear is nature, not people. It's nature. So it's wind, water, birds, it's sometimes seals. There's a lot of wonderful sounds here, and it's very rich and beautiful to enjoy the undiluted sounds of nature without machinery, without electromechanical noise, without traffic and so forth. It's great.
wow, that's wonderful. I love nature. So that's always that seems like a place that I would want to visit because I love the sound of nature.
Yeah, it's
And
not easy to get these days, particularly obviously if you live in a city, it's very difficult. And every time I go to New York, I look up and there's a little bird sitting on top of a walk, don't walk sign, tweeting at the top of its voice, and you can't hear it because the traffic noise is too loud. And I just think, it's a really tough gig, isn't it, for that little bird to find a mate or defend its territory if nobody can hear it at all. So
Yeah, quite
I
interesting.
prefer I prefer the unadulterated sounds of nature without the traffic.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And you've been here for for quite some time, I would say, and you've seen things and done things. Tell us what it is that you've lived doing, and what has been your passion.
When you say I've been here, you mean on the planet?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, on the planet.
Yeah, 65 years and counting. And I had a fairly long career in marketing, initially in magazine publishing, and then launched my own company producing customer magazines in the UK for some big brands like Apple, Orange, and so forth. Lexus, global, beautiful global customer magazines. And I sold that in 2002. All the way through that, I had a second life, and that life was a musician. So I'm a drummer. I've played since I was very young. And like most musicians, I think I listened to the world in a slightly different way. If you're playing in a band or an orchestra, you
Hmm.
have to listen in a multi track way. You're listening to every other instrument
Yeah.
and very attentively as well. Otherwise, you're not going to play very well if you're not in that groove with everybody and understanding everything that's going on.
Hmm.
So, research is now backing up that musicians listen slightly differently. In fact, musicians have slightly larger brains than non musicians because of that development, because of this kind of listening, as well as, of course, the dexterity of playing an instrument, which is quite difficult. Um, so I'd been listening to the world all the way through doing this marketing career. And I was thinking, why does the world sound so bad? Why is it so noisy? Why does nobody pay attention? And why is nobody sensitive to it?
Hmm.
So when I sold my publishing company, I started a company called The Sound Agency, which I still run today, 20 years later. It's an audio branding company. So it asks the question, how does your brand sound? And helps companies to design sound that is congruent with all the rest of their branding. They're all obsessed about how they look.
Hmm.
And I talk to marketing directors. Do you have a brand book? Yes, we have a brand book. Okay, here it is. It's a huge, great book. Oh, great. How many pages are about sound? None. What, this is crazy. We experience the world in five senses, not just one. And actually, as I researched when I started the sound agency, sound affects us really powerfully. It changes our bodies, our feelings, our thinking, ability to concentrate, and our behavior as well. So, for example, fast paced music makes you walk faster, chew faster, eat faster, do all sorts of things faster,
Hmm.
leave a place faster. It's very important to understand this enormous impact that sound has on us. And most people don't think about it at all. So, that was really my passion, was to start companies and brands being intentional and listening to the sound they make and designing it as opposed to it just being an accidental byproduct. And along the way, I wrote a book. The book was called Sound Business, all about
Hmm.
the use of sound in business. And then I got to do a TED talk I think it was 2009 was the first one, which was about the four effects of sound. And they were quite excited about that because nobody had ever actually used sound effects in a TED talk, which is what I did.
Hmm.
So I then got to do four more TED Talks in successive years, which was a fairly amazing experience, five in a row. And the third one was a bit of a revelation to me because I realized the reason organizations aren't listening and are making a lot of noise is because the people in them don't listen very well. And so I did a TED Talk about listening.
Hmm.
Then I did one about architects, asking them to start listening to the spaces they design. And the final TED Talk was called How to Speak So That People Want to Listen. And that was about speaking. And that's the one that went absolutely ballistic. I think collectively, all those TED Talks have been seen more than 150 million times now, which is mind boggling to me.
Wow,
Say.
wow.
Um, but it's quite interesting. The TED Talk about speaking has been seen by at least five times as many people
Hmm.
as the TED Talk about listening. So we are keener to be heard than we are to listen
Mm.
generally. And that's something which I think we need to address in the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I love this quote that I usually hear, and this is something that reminds me that I should be a good listener, and I try my level best to listen well. And it says that the reason, and I don't know who made the quote, but I can draw it from the Bibles in some verse because I also see it there. It says the reason that we were made with two ears and one mouth is so that we can hear more than we speak.
I can tell you who said that. It was Epictetus, and quite a long time ago, a couple of thousand years ago.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a great quote because it really emphasizes that there are two important aspects to our most native communication skills. I mean, what frustrates me, and I always start my keynotes with this because it's such a sort of slap in the face, really, when you realize it. We have four communication skills:
Hmm.
reading, writing, speaking, and listening. We teach two of them in school. It's a scandal if a child leaves school unable to read and write. We don't teach speaking hardly at all. Maybe in America they do a bit of public speaking, but in most schools in the world we don't teach speaking at all, and we don't teach listening, not a bit. I mean,
Hmm.
there's almost no school in the world where I've come across they have a listening curriculum or a listening syllabus, or they teach it as a subject, which is crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
We've been
Sure.
using complex language for at least 100,000 years, and it's the most natural way that we can communicate.
Mm.
Reading and writing only came along about 5,000 years ago, and yet these days we spend so much of our lives with our heads down, looking at a screen, tapping on a keyboard, communicating in that way with each other. And I think it's tragic that we don't teach listening to our children. You think about it, if we taught children how to listen really well, they would get so much more out of that education that we're spending a lot of money trying to provide them with. But the sad fact is, many children who aren't taught how to listen are sitting in classrooms with terrible acoustics,
Mm.
and they can't hear their education very well. They have to work really hard to hear it. If they don't work that hard, they're missing it. It's like watering a garden and missing all the plants, in my opinion. It is absolutely tragic and something that we need to change. After all, you only have to look around in world politics at the moment to see what happens if people stop listening to each other. This is what is missing right now,
Hmm.
is listening to other people as opposed to shouting at them, making them wrong, judging them, condemning them, and so forth, which is becoming more and more common in the world now.
Yeah, sure, sure. Now, listening is an important thing. We agree. Earlier on, you spoke about asking about the company about their books, and then they would not show you some pages where they have listed sound, anything to do with sound and listening. And I was wondering to myself, you've gone into a company that is dealing with stationery. What has that got to do with sound? And please.
Well, every company exists in five dimensions, if you like. I
Mhm.
mean, it may be that the product they make is silent. There's not a lot of sound in a book, as you say,
Yeah.
or a pair of trousers. Well, there may be if there's an audio book, of course, or if the book becomes a film, or so on and so on and so on.
Hmm.
However, the company itself will communicate with its users, its prospects, and its staff. And a lot of that communication is in sound. It might be advertising, it might be YouTube videos, it might be social media posts, it might be anything like that. It might be what you hear when you phone them up.
Hmm.
What's the on hold sound? How do people answer the phone? What kind of voices do they have? How do they speak? Is there a corporate style to their communication? Many companies now are picking this up, and they have a thing called a sonic logo. So you can think of, I don't think many people listening to this could draw Intel's logo, but I
Hmm.
bet lots of them could sing it. Da 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 da. I mean, it's a very familiar sound. So there are lots of companies which do that now, McDonald's, Audi, that you just think of all of these sonic logos, Netflix, the the pounding double knock of Netflix.
Okay.
So it's become more common to explore the power of sound in branding, in marketing communication, but also we need to be thinking about it in the spaces that we design, starting with the offices where our people are working. And there are so many people in the world now who are finding it difficult in open plan offices to concentrate because of the noise, because of conversation of other people around them. Noise is the number one problem in modern offices for that reason. And so I was very, very excited to be involved in the launch of a company a couple of years ago called Mood Sonic, which
Mhm.
creates lovely biophilic, that is to say nature-based soundscapes,
Mm.
which reduce the impact of that unwanted conversation and also enhance people's health. Because, we started talking about nature sound at the beginning of this. It's good for you. There's lots of research now to show that nature sound can reduce blood pressure, can improve recovery times from illnesses. It's good for cognition. So, yeah, that's what Mood Sonic does. And that's, I hope, going to help some of those millions and millions of people who are having their lives blighted by, shut up, I'm trying to think, with the noise going on around them.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. And don't get me started on schools and hospitals where the oral environment there is shocking. Hospitals
Mm.
12 times as loud as they should be, roughly, according to the WHO. Schools where, as I said earlier, the children simply can't hear their education because nobody thinks about the acoustics of the schoolroom. So we have a long way to go. We spend 95% of our lives indoors, and a lot of the spaces that we are occupying are simply not fit for purpose. So a little tip again to anyone listening to this, you can do a little audit of your own living space. Simply go into every room and close your eyes and ask yourself the question, is this the best sound I could have in this room for whatever I'm wanting to do in there? So you could think about being more creative. For example, if you have trouble sleeping, a wonderful sound to use is gentle surf. And you can get loops of that on the internet. There are sites like mynoise.net, a wonderful site where you can play with all sorts of incredible sound effects and create your own lovely mixture. So there are ways you can do this and deploy it in your home. In every room, you could have a beautiful soundscape. You could have something that's memorable, something that supports you and makes you healthier, happier, and more productive.
Mm. Thank you for the tip. And since we are waiting to hear secrets of speaking and listening, give us more tips on in that area. The secrets. I know you have several things. Being there for the time that you've been there and done everything that you've done in this area. Give us a few secrets.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with listening. A couple of things which will really help people. First is the understanding that listening is not the same as hearing.
Mm.
Listening is work. It's a skill. So it's a skill that you can practice and master. And it's really worth doing that because people who listen well have many advantages in life. They tend to be better communicators, they have better relationships, and so on and so on. They learn better, and they enjoy more of their life. They experience life more richly. So just understanding that is the first great step, that listening is a skill and it's
Mm.
action, it's work. The second thing to understand about listening, which is really important, is not to make the biggest mistake I see people making most of the time, which is to assume everybody listens like I do. They don't.
Mm.
We all listen through a set of filters, and those filters are different from one person to the next. Things like the values, attitudes, beliefs that we pick up along the way, the culture we're born into, the language we learn to speak, our intentions or expectations in any given situation, assumptions about what's going on in somebody else's head, maybe, emotions, all these things affect the way we listen. So it changes through the day and it changes from person to person. So
Mm.
when you're speaking, it's enormously powerful to ask yourself the question, what's the listening I'm speaking into? Because it's unique to that person or that group at that moment. And simply by asking yourself that question, what's the listening I'm speaking into, you can become more and more sensitive to it and adapt your content, your delivery, whatever it might be, to fit the listening appropriately. And that is how you hit the bullseye instead of missing the target altogether. So don't assume everybody listens like I do and speak to yourself. It's not very effective because it's not you you're speaking to. So there's a couple of really significant things about listening, and that one kicks into speaking. I think with speaking, one of the most important things about it is to not make it all about you. You know, I've seen people walk on stage and give talks where it's all about them. They want affirmation. They're trying to show off or get people to like them or applaud them or whatever it may be. Well, actually, whenever you're speaking to somebody, it's about the gift you're giving. So I have a little acronym for 4 things you can stand on that really help you to do that. And they spell the word hail. So H, honesty. Being clear and straight in what you say. Just absolutely straight. Don't try and impress or confuse people. Clear and straight. The A is authenticity. That is to say, being yourself. You are enough. You don't need to pretend to be somebody that you're not. The I, integrity. Being your word. If you promise it, you do it. If you say it, it happens. That's what gives your words power. And finally, the L of hail, perhaps surprisingly, love. By which I don't mean romantic love, of course. I'm talking about simply wishing people well. You know, the Christians would call it agape, love. Buddhists talk about loving kindness. It's simply wishing people well. And if you, in every conversation, wish the other person well and you're keen to give them a gift or whatever it might be, that will engender such a deeper and more powerful and effective relationship than if you fall into the big traps of looking good. You know, we all like to look good, of course, but if that's what it's all about, it doesn't go down very well. And even more than looking good, if there's one thing we like more than that, it's being right. And there's a great quote from Harville Hendricks, the great American counselor and author on relationships. He said, you can either be right or be in a relationship. I think that's so true, you know. And we spend a lot of the time now, sadly, on social media, on the internet. It's so much of it is about making people wrong. It's about being right, of course. If I make somebody else wrong, it makes me right and I feel better about myself, I suppose. But sadly, that kind of process is snowballing. Hence, you get pylons in social media, you get trolling, you get all sorts of really unpleasant things happening where somebody's torn to pieces by a mob of people who are feeling better about themselves because they're right and making that person wrong. And this is what we see in politics now, the polarization of politics, where it's about shouting. It's impossible to agree about anything your opponents say anymore, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, once upon a time, you could actually say, well, you know, the right honourable member, as we would say in the UK, on the other side of the House has a very good point, and we'll take that on board. You can't say that anymore. You have to say he's an idiot, and you know, make some slur or whatever it may be. I think it's a very dangerous time right now. You know, I did a talk at TEDx Athens a long time ago where I said listening is the sound of democracy, because listening creates understanding. And if we're not listening and we haven't got that understanding, how can we have civil society? How can we live next door to somebody with whom we fundamentally disagree? If we lose that listening, then the most terrible things can happen. You know, I still remember what happened in Rwanda, for example. You know, one minute people are living next door and chatting over the garden fence. The next minute they're hitting each other with machetes. I mean, that is the breakdown of listening that can happen so quickly in a society. And
Mm.
we're seeing it happen, I think, more and more in the US, in my country as well, in Europe, and obviously in the dictatorships in this world. There's not much listening going on at all. So dangerous times, I think. Never have we needed listening more than we do now.
Yeah, they are dangerous times. I want to be heard. I want to be right. And it's good that you bring in the picture that with that quote that you'd either have or either be right or be in a relationships.
Yeah, Harville Hendricks, he's worth looking up. He's a great man.
Because when you're right and you're letting all the others, I mean, know or believe that they are wrong, then you've lost that relationship.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
so true. That's so true. And he said that actually the second part of that quote is, and you can't curl up with being right at the end of the day.
Mm.
So, I think it's very profound. And the thing that's missing a lot of the time is the ability of people to validate other people. So when I train, I do workshops on communication skills. One of the key elements of that is reminding people about the ability to validate. That is to say, I might say, Anthony, I fundamentally disagree with you, but I completely understand why you would think that. Now, you don't feel offended by that. We have, two opposing views. And of course,
Yeah.
two people can both be right because they're in their own perspectives. They've got their own listening filters, their own experience. So we might both be right in our own worlds, but disagree fundamentally. But if I
Mm.
don't invalidate you, if I don't say that's ridiculous, don't be so stupid, then you're in the defensive, you'll start attacking me. We have conflict, and that is the way to all sorts of horrible things. Whereas validation, where I say, well, I do understand why you would think that, then we've got the ability to come together and perhaps create something which might be, the best of both worlds, and it might be a new solution. So validation is absolutely critical.
Wow. Is there a place you share those ideas, like just what you just said right now? Because there are many people who may not have an idea of how to validate others. There are people who would always go with the idea of being right every time. I have got to prove myself because I know I'm right and I need to, yeah. So tell us where we can find more material, maybe a book you've written or something else that you
Well,
can.
yes, I wrote a second book. There's a third one coming out next year, actually, which is about the relationship between human beings and sound, called Sound Effects. But the second book is about communication skills, and it's called How to Be Heard. And that's, oh, there it goes. And that's available. And there's an audiobook, which I narrated myself, which won both of the global audiobook awards for Best Business Audiobook of the Year, which was really great because I recorded that in a tiny little studio up here in Orkney where they normally have fiddles and barons and accordions and things. It's a folk music studio.
Mm.
And we were in there for 2 weeks recording this really carefully. And it was just a thrill to do something here that had global affirmation like that. It was really lovely. Also, of course, there's my website, juliantreasure.com, where you can download. There's a film I made of that TED talk that went completely ballistic.
Uh-huh.
It's me and a speaker coach in America picking it to pieces and saying, why did that work? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? It's quite interesting to really put it to pieces and look at why it was so successful. So that's freely available on my website or LinkedIn. And I post little videos on LinkedIn. There is one on validation, actually, which I did quite recently. So there are little videos and so on going on my LinkedIn page too. And I have a Substack also. If anybody's familiar with Substack, a wonderful new platform for blogging or newslettering, or in my case, posting audio and video quite often. So any of those places, I'd love to see you.
Wow. And it's good that you mentioned Substack because it's something that I've just been introduced to recently. I have not even up to 20 posts there. I'm loving the platform. I see
Mm.
you've been there for quite some time. I saw that you have like 4,000 subscribers and growing. Tell us a bit more about subs, and maybe for someone who may not know about it, tell us a bit about us about it.
Well, I think it's a very exciting initiative in a world where traditional media have been very challenged. You know, the newspapers that writers and reporters used to work for, they're downsizing, they're struggling very often, or they're being very politically driven. And so Substack is a free space where people like authors, poets, illustrators, journalists, commentators, gurus, uh, people like me and whatever I am, who have something to say, can post, and they can gather subscribers, mainly free, but you can also have a paid subscription on Substack. So there are plenty of people who are making their living on Substack by posting really good content that people are happy to pay to receive. And the payment goes directly from the reader to the writer without anybody in between. So it's an example of the disintermediation that's happened all over the place in the music industry, in the publishing industry, in lots and lots of different content-based industries where now the relationship is directly between the creator and the user, if you like.
Mm.
So I think Substack's done a great thing by doing that. They don't get in the way. They take a small commission of any paid subs, but not very much.
Mm.
And the platform is growing really fast. So you've now got people like Stephen Fry has just launched his Substack, which is, you know, obviously very witty and well written. But you've got some wonderful authors. Some of the world's best authors are on there, and certainly lots and lots of commentators. And it, you know, it goes from sports fans to politics to finance to cooking. You know, all sorts of different things are on there. In my case, sound and communication skills.
How long have you been on Substack?
Probably getting on for a year, I'd say. I met
Oh,
Mike Stowden, who's one of the stars of Substack. Actually, he's kind of been to Orkney a lot in his life, and he was up here, so we got together up here and had a really nice time together. And he kind of held my hand as I started out on Substack. But he's a great example of somebody who does it really, really well, and that's his living. That's what he does. He has a Substack presence, and that's how he makes his money.
yeah, it's wonderful. So people should follow you on Substack. If you, yeah, just follow.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
yeah,
Why not? Yes, and you know, just come and find me anywhere, and I'm really excited. I mean, my passion is spreading this message about the importance, particularly of listening. So I excuse me, I get excited to go and do workshops in companies and train people in how to explore these skills, which they don't even realise they're not doing most of the time. So it's kind of opening a curtain on a new world to people because people confuse these things with capabilities. You know,
mm,
everybody speaks, everybody listens, don't we? We just do it. Well, no,
yeah, we do.
not necessarily. You know, they're speaking and they're speaking. The human voice is an amazing instrument,
Sure.
and you know, it really does pay to pay attention to the instrument and to learn to master it at least to some degree, because your outcomes in life will be radically changed. Your happiness, your effectiveness, and your well-being all are related to how well you speak and how well you listen.
I agree to that, and I believe that our listener, our viewers, are going to agree with that. That is everything. That is everything. It's the communication and the reception of whatever words that you hear, and understanding, also understanding the nature around you. Like you are there where you are, you
Mm.
enjoy the day, you're happy, your blood pressure goes is maintained. Wow, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. We are almost coming to the end of the show, but would ask you, what's in the future for you? What big plans can we expect from you?
There's two things really. One is the new book, which we're finishing off in the next few weeks, and then it'll be published in spring 25 in the US, the UK, and several other countries. And it's called Sound Effects, and it's about the amazing miracles of sound, but also the relationship, most of all, the relationship between us and sound. which,
Mm.
as I said earlier, is something which is sadly neglected, and we need
Mhm.
to start paying attention. So that's one big thing. And the other big thing is I'm working with some AI specialists on the west coast of America to create an AI me, which would be able to teach people interactively and completely appropriately for each individual person. So all of my work and thinking and books and posts and videos and everything I've ever done really poured into an AI that will sound exactly like me. Well, it does. It's very accurate, but it'll be something where you can pull it out of your pocket on any device and say, Julian, I've got to talk tomorrow about bananas and I'm feeling quite nervous about it because I don't know much about them. And what should I do? And the AI, Julian, will come back with some very useful and entirely focused hints and tips about creating a great talk about bananas or whatever it is, Um, so it's it's I think it's a very exciting development. I think this is the future of education. And when you think through what's possible with AI, I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't have Albert Einstein teaching you physics, for example. There's
Mhm.
enough recordings of his voice to create an AI Albert Einstein, and you just pour all of his work into it, and then have him take you through the levels of physics to as far as you want to go. So this individualized, personalized, hand cut, guru in your pocket type education, I think that's the way we're going. And although I have an online course, 7.5 hours of it of material about communication skills, I think that kind of linear course structure is not long for this world. I think we'll be moving to something that reacts, interacts with us, and even, nags us. So, the AI Julian might say, Anthony, have you done your exercise this morning? You know,
Mm. Mhm.
because you undertook to, we made a contract and it's going to come back and nag you about it. So,
Yeah.
I think this is enormously powerful for children, for everyone in the world. It's a beneficial use of AI. Let's hope that that's as far as it goes and it doesn't decide to stamp us out like bugs, which is,
Mm. I've seen, I've
always
actually
possible.
seen places where it's being employed. This and it's exciting as well as scary
Mm.
because I may not know that in all this episode I've been talking to an AI Julian.
Not this time, but you never
But
know. In a few
in
months,
the future, maybe I could be speaking with the version of AI version of Julian, and I'm
yeah,
like, okay, let's keep going. And then at the
yeah,
end, I realize, oh, that was not Julian. Anyway, now that we have Julian, can you give us a few words that we should always remember? And we are going to end the show. Few words
just
to always.
one. Actually,
Okay,
just one.
one.
Listen, listen. Take it seriously. It's a skill. It's work. It's an action, and you owe it to the people around you. So when you've stopped watching this, how about maybe you're in your family or work? How about putting everything down and giving the next person you see 100% of your attention and really listen to them? You might get the response, "What are you doing?" Because we're not used to it. We do so much partial listening. But the key is to be conscious of how you're listening. It's fine to be partially listening if you know you're partially listening. And if you are prepared, if somebody's pouring their heart and soul out to you, you then say, oh, look, I'm just going to put this down, turn to them, give them 100% of your attention if it's important. So listen, listen, and understanding is the inevitable result.
Thank you very much, Julian. We really appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me, Anthony. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you for telling us everything that you have told us. To the viewer or the listener out there, thank you for listening. And once we are through with this, keep on listening. And don't forget to visit www.juliantreasure.com and connect with Julian. He's quite a treasure. And that's the end of today's episode. This has been your host, Anthony Murore, and together with our wonderful guest, Julian Treasure, we're saying keep listening as we also continue to go and listen to our nature around. Bye for now.